A lot of us might be thinking, uh, how do we prepare our child for the hard world? We need to bring some adversity into the home, make some things a little difficult, at least in the home environment. They'll be able to practice what they'll encounter outside. And what you're saying quite strongly is that's not how it works. If you compromise the home environment, if you unnecessarily bring conflict and that feeling of not being understood and not being validated into the home environment, that's going to stay with them. Whereas if you bring in this sense of the child feeling secure, feeling truly safe, feeling truly validated, feeling like they can truly be themselves in the home, whether or not that corresponds with the level of development that we would expect at that particular age, then that sense of security alone will be such a foundation for them to much better manage any situation in life than they would otherwise have been able to. So, Andrew, we said last time that we'd look at slightly older children this time. And I thought it'd be good to start looking at what happens when an autistic child moves towards being an autistic teenager and then an autistic adult, and how we as parents might worry about sort of how they will fare in the world and what's the best foundation we can give them for adult life. Because they come to a point, at some point in teenage, each child will come to a point where the parents are worried, well, what's going to happen when they go out into the world? How will they survive? How will they cope with all of the adversity there? How will they cope with the complications that humans have in their relationships with each other? And what can we do as they're getting older, whatever's happened before that age, what can we do now that we're getting closer to it, that'll give them a really good foundation for the future? So that's a very broad and very challenging question. And I know it's not your main area of expertise, certainly not these days. But I'd really love to hear your thoughts about this.
Well, it's a vital question and concern. It is true that I've kind of gone developmentally backwards in my own career, chronologically as well, developmentally backwards in terms of the community I'm serving. I did, although I started many decades ago now I started working with teenagers and adolescents with a range of developmental disabilities. I for many reasons, moved earlier to younger and younger kids, and now that's the community I mostly serve. Parents that have just had their kids diagnosed, kids that are sort of 3 and under. And what I would say is that in many cases, the same issues and challenges that we've spotlighted so much in terms of being able to listen to, tune into, acknowledge, and accept our children's initiatives are just as important as they get older. So, in other words, oftentimes what our kids most need from all of us is a place where they feel like they can be themselves, where they feel like what's inside of them, right? Their own particular thoughts, interests, wants, what brings them joy, that's all really, really good and worthy and beautiful. And our kids, this is part of where, as our kids are getting older, things get increasingly difficult, right? Our kids are functioning in schools, communities, systems, cultures that, essentially are ableist, right? Are saying there's a right way to be human, and it's not you.
Yeah.
And our kids are swimming in those waters all day, and so I think what I've said to you, and we've had this conversation over the years, Guy, is that the most important thing for our kids as they're getting older is to have a sense of safety, is to have some place, ideally at home, where they feel like they can be their authentic, full, and complete selves, and they don't have to hide out, and they don't have to pretend or mask or be on a battlefield to just relax and be themselves. And so I think this is a really important idea, just to come back to that. We all have to think about that, as whether we're parents or professionals. We have to think about how can we create an environment for our kids where they feel like they can really, truly, authentically relax and just be themselves. And sometimes when they don't have that space and they're having to work just as hard to mask or perform at home, their sense of security or safety gets even more compromised. And that's where we see a lot of really significant challenges, difficulties, and problems, and very high levels of anxiety for our kids, and resistance. So I just want to start with that frame, because
that's one of my favorite pieces of Andrew Shahan wisdom that I come across, which is, that just this idea that, because a lot of parents might be thinking, a lot of us might be thinking, how do we prepare our child for the hard world? We need to bring some adversity into the home, make some things a little difficult, make some things less easy. Even if that leads to conflict, at least they'll get some experience of conflict, and it'll be good practice. At least in the home environment, they'll be able to practice what they'll encounter outside. And what you're saying quite strongly is that's not how it works. If you compromise the home environment, if you unnecessarily bring conflict and that feeling of not being understood and not being validated into the home environment, that's going to stay with them. Whereas if you bring in this sense of the child feeling secure, feeling truly safe, feeling truly validated, feeling like they can truly be themselves in the home, whether or not that corresponds with the level of development that we would expect at that particular age, then that sense of security alone will be such a foundation for them to much better manage any situation in life than they would otherwise have been able to.
Yes.
Well, you agree, because it is your advice. I was just summarizing it, but that's my favorite bit of advice that you give, actually. I love that.
Yeah. And I wonder if you would be comfortable, Guy, because it's such a, I just think, I feel it's so important for parents to hear not only the professional perspective, from me, but also the parent perspective from your own lived experience. I would imagine that you have been on your own journey of really trying to create that kind of safe environment at home for your son. And I don't think it's always easy, but I'd love if you would be comfortable sharing anything with us about that, about what you've learned about how to create that safety, that support at home for your son.
You're putting me on the spot now. So, as you know, we were extremely lucky, extremely fortunate to find input at a very early age. My son's my son was very early, that really emphasized the importance of relationship, the importance of building that strong foundation with the child and creating that sense where they feel validated and strong. And so our emphasis right from the start has been on creating this feeling of everything's acceptable, everything's okay, everything's going to be all right. And to try and manifest that in our family life as much as we possibly can. That's not to say that all anxiety has totally disappeared, although it's a tiny fraction of what it could have been, a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of what it could have been because of this. Um, and I think it's very much seeped in to my son's value system as
Mm.
well. He's extremely sort of open-hearted and generous
Mm.
in a sort of in a way that's extremely rare in the world, I think.
Mm.
So yeah, I don't know if that's I have anything much more to say than that.
Wow. That's I'm just moved, I'm touched as you shared that, because I do think that there's a tender-heartedness and a kind-heartedness that mm, that is a part of who we are as human beings, that in many ways gets very much trampled by the brutality of the world, the societies that we live in, and what a precious thing that you have been able to you know, connect with your son, support him in ways that have kept his heart open. I think especially for boys, for young boys, there's so much training and social conditioning to disconnect from our emotions, from our vulnerability, right, from our sense of kind of love and care and connection with other people. I know for myself, growing up, you know, here in the States versus in the UK, there was so much training to be disconnected from my feelings, to not feel, to try to be accepted by being distant, cool, tough, shut down, and um, yeah, and any kind of tenderheartedness or vulnerability was absolutely made
Weakened.
fun of, targeted. It was a sign of weakness. Yeah, yeah, and I think um, that really brutalizes our young boys,
Yeah.
and so it's huge that you have given, you know, your son a different sense of
Well, we
safety.
often talk in these things about how when we're on a journey like this, it's not only a journey for our children, it's a journey in ourselves
Mm,
as well. And we need, you know,
mm,
in order to be able to impart it to our children, we need to find it in ourselves.
mm,
So this whole journey of parenting, it might be difficult. There might be a lot of challenges along the way, but it's so rewarding, not only in terms of the relationship with the child, but also in terms of the journey of discovery we go on in ourselves and what we find in ourselves and how we get the motivation and the inspiration and the incentive to act on what we find in ourselves in a way we wouldn't, because humans are lazy. We wouldn't, otherwise we would just leave it. We'd just notice and say, okay, fine, maybe one day. But when there's that urgency, because you've got a relationship with a child that's depending on us becoming something better, we put that extra effort in.
mm. Yes, yes, and it's true, Guy. I mean, I every experience that I have with a young child and family is an opportunity for me to practice opening my heart more, right? And um, calming my nervous system down even more so that I can hold space for a child to relax, a family to relax. And so for me, it's not a job in that sense.
Yeah.
It's for me a practice of learning how to deepen my own um, connection with myself and with my own heart, and then sharing that in the world. And unfortunately, mm, that idea of this kind of heart-centered care, although it's getting more traction now, has been greatly feared in certainly um, in our systems of care, in sort of capitalist systems and cultures. It's terrifying for, I think, for us to think about um, systems that we would be designed that way, because we're kind of programmed to be these machines that are, you know, thinking, competing, analyzing. Um, and so I think that we get lost really with good intentions in terms of the kinds of the ways that we're setting up our programs, our schools to train our kids to be disconnected from their hearts.
It's amazing you found work that has enabled you to sort of, to be in that position where there's no difference between work and life, between your work
Yeah.
interests and your personal interests. That's wonderful. But Andrew, I know there'll be people watching this going, well, yeah, they're talking about this old thing again. This is their favorite thing. What about those of us who didn't have access to these messages
Yes.
when our children were young? Now
Yeah.
they're 13, 14, 15. What can we do from this point? And I just wonder if you have any thoughts. That's a much harder question, but I wonder if you
Mm-hmm.
have any thoughts on it.
It starts, it starts with us, and it starts with really, I think we have to be honest about really every family is in their own unique place with access to resources, access to support, um, um, access to things like even mental things like mental health support, access to things like you know, a lot of families are struggling just to get food on the table and just to get through everyday life. And the idea of something like heart opening meditation or connection, whatever it might be, it's just not even in awareness, right? Because we're in survival mode. What I would say though is we've talked about this before, but within every family, even when families can't see it, right? Because families are in this intense mode of surviving. Within every family, there are strengths and there are moments of connection and moments of um, sharing a moment of joy together, sharing a moment of calm, or how can I say, a shared experience where one or two family members are kind of taking a breath together, even if it's they're in front of the TV, whatever those moments are. So I really think, rather than thinking about it as something that families are constantly having to reach for outside of what everyday life looks like, I really try to help families really consider, um, regardless of how crazy difficult the day might be, um, where are there moments where there's 5 minutes where you're sitting and eating something together, where you just look at each other and smile for a second? Can we build on those moments?
Yeah.
Can we at least start by acknowledging those moments and then strengthening them? And what would that look like? And it's, again, sounds incredibly simple, but most families don't have the luxury to step back and reflect on those things and spotlight them.
And well, however hard it is when the child is 3, it's going to be much harder when the child's 13. But at the same time, it really is the same principles, isn't it? It's all of the things that we've been
Yes.
talking about, how to deal with 3-year-olds. It's the same principles in terms of how to deal with 13-year-olds. It's
Mm-hmm.
just that it's going to take a lot more work and a lot more patience. And maybe we can cultivate those moments, maybe we can do little things like we can make some time where we're not having our head full of work or whatever it is for each person. If we're like sort of on the computer all day
Mm-hmm.
in meetings with the office or whatever, uh, maybe we make the time for food. We actually deliberately make time to eat together. We leave the phones away from the table. I know that's a radical thing to do. And we
Brilliant.
sit together at the same time And whatever happens, we're there with each other and our focus is on each other. It's not somewhere else about what's going on in our lives. It's about with each other. And do you think that's just a way of inviting those situations to come into our lives?
Absolutely, Guy. I mean, it's amazing because I grew up at a time where there were no phones, there were no tablets, no screen. I mean, there was a TV, but um, and so it's an incredible thing to see how, in many ways, our phones and screens have become very powerful tools for all of us, but also have really consumed massive amounts of the time and attention and focus that we used to have in sometimes just being together as family. Um, and what I would say is this is just a very simple thing, but even if everyone's got their phone out, everyone's on the screen, what I would say is there a way we could think about sharing with each other what we're actually interested in looking at, laughing at on our screens, right? So even if we're gonna like, because I understand that saying take away the screens, stop the screens is gonna backfire in many ways. So one of the things I'll say is, what is what are you watching on your screen as a parent that's bringing you great joy? And of course, sometimes the content is going to be comedy that may not be appropriate for your teenage or preteen child, right? But perhaps what's your child looking at or watching on screen in terms of music, right? In terms of whatever something on social media that you actually might be able to watch and laugh at together, and then have a shared moment of joy. Even
Yeah.
if we just did that, even if we just increase those moments where I'm curious, what are you laughing about? What are you checking out? Instead of me staying in my own world of I'm on my screen, and then that
Yeah.
wife's on screen and cousins on another screen, like we're all
Yeah.
separate like screen tunnels, right? Like what if we thought about, let's share, let's watch something or enjoy something together. Even if we just made that shift, that would increase the number, increase the connection, increase the shared moments of joy, where I'm not just looking at my screen, but I'm actually looking up for a second at the person next to me who I can see is smiling and laughing at the same thing that I'm laughing and smiling at. If we just did that, we would increase those connection moments.
And do you think, because that's really nice, because it's for like finding moments of connection without trying to impose any rules that might backfire,
Mm-hmm.
as you say, like no phones at the table or something like that. And do you think that when a child is looking at I mean, any child is lost in the phone,
Mm-hmm.
they're seeking something in the phone that's inferior to what they're really seeking outside, but isn't available to them?
Mm.
And, it might be a bit of an adjustment. It might take a while to convince them of this. But when they start to interact in human ways, even if it's about what's on their phone, uh, they're going to respond to that, because that's the sort of connection that they've been craving for and that they haven't had. So it might take a while to sort of open it up. But when it's there, it has the potential to open up something much bigger.
Absolutely, Guy. Absolutely. I mean, there's a wonderful film that I just your what you just said made me think of. It's called I believe it's called Life Animated, and it was a documentary that was made here in the States about a family, about a husband and wife, with two sons, one of whom is autistic, and it's about the basically the father discovers, and it's narrated through his experience, his perspective of trying to understand and connect with his autistic son. He begins to recognize his son loves Disney movies, and he begins to pay really close attention to the particular clips, moments, voices that his son is responding really positively to. And then he just starts experimenting, and he actually says a line in a particular voice of a Disney character, and all of a sudden his son turns towards him, and they begin this whole journey of connecting and interacting around these Disney characters and voices that the dad had no idea was even possible. And that's just a really
What's the film
powerful
called?
example. It's called Life, comma, animated. Or wait,
Life.
I think it's Life Animated. I want to look it up now. Let me just get my phone.
Okay.
It's called Life Animated. Yeah, it's a beautiful film. And but again, it starts with basically framing things the way that you just did. Is there a way to really build connection, even through a screen,
Yeah.
right? Because I think you were saying also, our kids are seeking in many ways. I believe this is true for all of our kids, whether they're neurodiverse, whether they're autistic, whatever the case, neurotypical. Um, I believe that we're all wired for connection. I don't think that changes just because a child has a more sensitive, potentially easily overwhelmed nervous system. I believe that child still deeply, more than anything in the world, wants connection. And so when we have the screen becoming so compelling and powerful and captivating, some of that has become, in many ways, a replacement for connection, because the screen is very predictable. It generates a certain emotional experience. I mean, even though I'm not necessarily playing the same clip in a movie, maybe over and over again, in the way that some of my young autistic kids are, I still love particular scenes in particular movies, and I can watch them over and over again because they make me laugh. They make me feel good. They make me, sort of have this emotional experience. So I think our kids are getting very drawn into those experiences, in part because they haven't had those kinds of sustained positive exchanges with people, and people can be much less predictable and much less. How can I say, in some ways, easy to connect with or respond to, right? A scene in a video or a particular song or whatever is extremely predictable and powerful in ways that people are not.
That film sounds like it could be a good inspiration. It could give a lot of ideas to families
Yes,
as well.
I have to look it up, Guy, because I'm so curious if it's life animated. I'm 99% sure it is. It was out maybe, I want to say, a decade ago. Yeah,
Okay.
Life Animated. There it is, 2016,
Okay.
American documentary. Yeah,
Okay. Sounds
highly
great.
recommended.
Sounds really good.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Another really enlightening episode. And I'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Guy. It was a joy as always.